Welcome everyone to the Eastside Freedom Library, where we have been having a series of conversations about what's been going on in Ethiopia, some of it in a historical context. Recently, several conversations focusing on the Oromo community and the Oromo perspective. I think today's conversation will be in English, and I hope that everyone who is watching will be able to follow okay. And I'm going to ask our guests to introduce themselves, and if everyone would just talk a little bit to begin with about what is going on, both with the Prime Minister and with the emergence of new ethnic conflict and what the situation might be, and what people in the diaspora and here in the United States can do to help support peace in Ethiopia. So, Nagesa, would you start? And we'll start in just the initial comments short, and then see what others think.
Okay.
Okay? Did you have a long speech?
No. Okay, I will start here. To say a few things. Actually, I am not prepared to make any speech or any presentation today, but by chance, one of our panelists didn't show up, Taferi Nguse. He couldn't make it, and then I am just replacing him, so it's not like a well-prepared thing. What we wanted to talk is about the challenges and opportunities of democratization in Ethiopia. And actually, we will be seeing its implication on the Horn, and then we have also Eritrean colleagues and who can say a lot. Actually, Ethiopia is a home for Eritreans. Also, I mean, we are like we have it together, and so they can say a lot. They can say also about Eritrea or about Ethiopia. But to say a few things. We, at the moment, we have a lot of challenges since the Prime Minister was declared about his Nobel Prize winning. The challenges are that there is this, we have been talking about it, there is a kind of ethnic tension, there is a kind of political polarization in Ethiopia, and that is causing a lot of instability, and there has not been made some kind of peace and reconciliation. That's what we have been calling for, and it looks like that there is a lot of challenge for democratization. I'm not going to say that in detail. I will just I'll give a chance to Hangatu. I can say a few things after that, and after other panelists say, present their part.
Did you introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, my name is Nagesa Dube. I thought that everybody knows me because I'm
all
all here.
World.
Yeah. I have been here all the time. I mean, mostly in this panel. I think 5 times now. So my name is Nagesa Dube. I am a human rights activist, and currently I'm working at Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid in a legal organization and a lawyer by profession.
People should, since we don't have a microphone, so be sure to...
Oh, to be loud. Okay, correct.
Do you want me to use the
No,
mic?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Just make
If
sure
there is
that
microphone, that's fine, I think. Maybe
okay.
Hangatu and...
Great.
Yeah. Because yep. Yeah. Let me give chance to Hangatu, and then I can talk later. Introduce yourself, and then you can. Yeah, let's do introduction first. Thank you.
Hi, my name is actually Najaha Musay. I am a third-year medical student. I graduated from St. Olaf College, and I actually recently traveled to Ethiopia after 20 years of being away. I was born and raised in Oromia, but went back just almost a year ago and saw some of the situations in Addis Ababa especially, and so I can speak on that a little bit.
Thank you, Angatu.
Okay, my name is Petros Haile. I call myself a community activist in a broader term. I've been engaged in community activities since 1986, the foundation of Eritrean community in Minnesota. In fact, this subject is more of those two gentlemen that you see across the professors. Have done so much research and study on the subject matter, but my friend asked me to say a few words on Eritrean behalf. That's why I decided to come here, and I'll do my best.
My name is Mohammed, also known as Mahdi. I'm interning here for this semester. I'm doing a program called Hagwa, so that's how I happen to be here. I'm also a student, third-year student in UFM. I'm doing my bachelor's on global studies and Middle East. So I have a lot of passion when it comes to human rights and community activism, and that's what I've been doing here for the past few months. And I've been engaging with the East African community, co-organizing with Mr. Nagasa, and I'm here to learn more about, all these issues that's happening back home. And I said I'm a student, so I'm here to learn more about the experience and knowledge of this gentleman. Yeah.
But, you are Somali, but you grew up in Ethiopia.
Yes, actually I forgot about that. So I'm Somali, and there are a lot of Somalis who reside in Ethiopia. So, you could, Ethiopian Somali, you could say that. But I also grew up in Ethiopia for a very long time. I had my higher education in Ethiopia, and I only came here 2014, so I know more about Ethiopia because I've been living there for so many years in my life, and I also know much more about Somali people. And so when it comes to talking about the youth and their role, I think I can add to some perspectives on that, because last time I have had a Somali youth forum here, and those were the same things we talked about, like how do we bring this youth together and then talk about the challenges they are facing here as a first generation immigrants, and what are the challenges back home, and how do we contribute to the peace and development and stability and all that. So yes, thank you.
My name is Awit Walda Michael. I am a professor of history at Macalester College and Queen's University in Canada, and Macalester College here in St. Paul.
Joseph Walente, I'm a professor at the U, background in political science. Just a guest, just here to listen.
Okay, so let's do ladies first here. Let's give to Najaha to make her first presentation on the challenges and opportunities. I hope let her have her say, and then we will continue.
Well, I didn't really have a presentation prepared. I assume this was a Q&A, but I will say just a few remarks on that. I didn't go to school in Ethiopia, so I'm a little bit ignorant about the education system and its history. But the little that I do know, I understand that many of the ethnic groups in Ethiopia have very few rights in terms of determining their identities and their sort of pursuit of democracy, economic and regional stability. And so I think there are many opportunities for the Prime Minister to be able to sort of veer from the history that Ethiopia has had in terms of marginalizing ethnic groups in regions and promoting this federalism that's ethnic based and that sort of TPLF or the Ethiopian People's Democratic Front's primary objectives as opposed to allowing everybody to be able to voice their opinions and how to sort of birth a new Ethiopian constitution that allows everybody to have a say. And so I think it is challenging for him to be able to incorporate those differences and those political differences to make one Ethiopia. But I do believe he should be able to learn from the history and some of the challenges that have come to the past presidents and prime ministers and use that as a stepping ground to go forward.
Okay, I will continue from that. My say on this, on democratization, is definitely, I will mention a few general points. Generally, people who studied about democratization say the first thing is maybe the level of literacy of the people under consideration. Obviously, the level of literacy for Ethiopia is very low. That is one of the challenges of, and the level of understanding of people and readiness for democracy. I know our people resisted the oppression, our people resisted the injustice that has been committed by the past regimes. However, I am not sure, I don't think we're ready for democracy, in a sense that there is the level of understanding of how democracy works and how we should tolerate each other. We lack a lot on that, I think, and a lot has to be done on how democracy works. And maybe NGOs and other human rights organizations should work on that in Ethiopia. I know the medias are working, but we need more on that because unless people have a good understanding of the democracy, and when they are given the freedom, if they abuse that, if they use it not in the right way, then that is causing instability, that's causing chaos, and that would be a great challenge. The other thing is income and the economy. Most poor countries, they can't be democracy. And even if they become democracy, it will be averted. They will soon lose it. They get back to authoritarian or dictatorship because we are one of the poorest countries, and the rate of unemployed people is very high. All those users who have been protesting, who have been opposing the TPLF or EPRDF hegemony and dictatorship, they are still unemployed. A lot of university graduates are unemployed. And in that country, the largest employer is a government, not private companies or corporations. And the capacity of government is very limited. People have been in euphoria for about a year when this changed, when the new prime minister came to power. Nothing have changed for them. And so they are coming back to the street. And some people think that they are coming to the street because of an activist. I don't think so. When you are unemployed and you despair, you wait for some change in your life, you wait for something to happen, and nothing changes. One is because of capacity, but people think this government can change everything and government has every capacity. That's not true. They don't know how much their annual budget of the country is. It's maybe like maybe it's equal to the budget of U of M, the annual budget of the Ethiopia. So the government mostly living on aid, on loans from World Bank and other. Actually, the Nobel Prize was one of a very good gesture for international community to support Ethiopia. It was meant for that, I think, to call on the other countries. I also have experience of corporate Minnesota and other people paying attention to Ethiopia to go and invest when that Nobel Prize happened. I have some people who contacted me and people who want to lobby other companies to go to Ethiopia, but soon another protest broke out and people are, there is no peace in Ethiopia. So a door opened, we closed it. So it's very sad. People don't understand those things, that they are closing their doors on themselves. So this, unless a little bit economic progress, it is very difficult to have democracy or to maintain democracy. So another thing is peace and stability. Unless there is peace and stability, and still we can't have democracy, the country may go to disintegration. There is ethnic divide, political polarization. If the prime minister does one thing, different groups who are on different sides, they look at what he said. Is he favoring us or they? Favoring us or they? So soon one will say, okay, he is favoring those groups and opposing him. And the other group will a little bit looks excited that happens. And soon another speech he makes, the other group will be disappointed and this group will be, and it's a kind of one group is pulling to the east and another group is pulling to the west, and which people are not really listening to each other and like making conversation. So there has to be some mechanism, some way to break this and make people talk to each other. I mean, especially stakeholders come together. Unless that happens, the very existence of Ethiopia will be in great problem. So I see that as a great problem. The other problem I see in Ethiopia is there is intra-government, intra-party competition for power. Even the party in power, I don't think is in agreement with itself. I mean, there are groups and there are factions competing for power. And also maybe the opposition party which are outside they're somehow quiet, but still instead of putting the public interest, the interest of the nation ahead, there are also there are groups that think that if they hold power, they can solve every problem, which is not true. They are only focusing on holding power, and they call on election. And I don't think even the election that is coming to happen in 5 months would be helpful for me. I think that the election should be postponed and some consensus, some form of understanding should be made before any election takes place in Ethiopia. In general, I might have a say after later on as a conclusion, my recommendations, but that is the reality that is happening. And to say from current things, there are conflicts in different places. There is a conflict between university students, like now in Waldea University in Amharic region. 2 Oromo students are killed between the conflict between university students. That is the last night or today. That's what I have. And there is a conflict in Diasporic, the one of the second capital, the second city, largest city in Ethiopia, to the east. I have 2 of my colleagues here who are from that town, so they can say a few things about it. I want to call on people to really calm down, to try to solve things, not to aggravate these conflicts, to cool down and talk according to our culture, according to the custom we have. And I want to call for peace again and again. When last time happened, ethnic conflict happened in Ethiopia, I did make a call to our people. I want to say that again. And thank you. I'll give the chance to others.
Again, when I speak in front of the 2 professors, I feel like a dwarf. but I'm going to do it anyways. So, since the topic is challenges and opportunities in the Horn of Africa, an expert yesterday declared that the problem that we see in Ethiopia is a problem of transition. It's very common throughout the world. So in transition, either you can change it to a more constructive change, or you'll end up destroying it. It all depends how the leadership, the management handles this crisis. And again, since there's no specific subject to discuss, what I did is I just picked 3 issues from the flyer. And the first one is the election of Abiy Ahmed as a prime minister. The second one is the negotiation of peace treaty with Eritrea. The third one is the outbreak of inter-ethnic violence in the past month, the one that you just mentioned. So what one can observe is, all this crisis has some historical justification, meaning the ethnic conflict in Ethiopia is not something new. It's not that Abiy Ahmed brought it into the picture. It has been there for years. In fact, it existed as a system for the last 27 years, the ethnic federalism in Ethiopia. But recently, the expansion of Addis Ababa into the Oromo region ignited the crisis. That, with a sympathetic group from OPDO within the establishment, which Abiy Ahmed came from, and a massive media campaign from the diaspora, such as OMN and others, and the opposition movement stationed in Eritrea as well. These are the 4 factors that people need to consider when we're talking about how Abiy Ahmed came into the picture. The second one is the negotiation of peace treaty with Eritrea. The peace treaty, what happened was TPLF as one Kullal or regional organization was mandated, not mandated, but it was the only negotiating partner on behalf of Eritrea. So that's why the final and binding boundary commission decision was manipulated by one group within Ethiopia. It was not consulted by the whole, correct me if I'm wrong. So one of the problems, I'll come to it later on, why I'm saying that. And so the hostile relationship between Eritrea and Tigray created or become a harbor. Many opposition organizations were harbored in respective countries, some of them in Tigray and the other one in Eritrea. I'm talking about, again, for the last 27 years. In Eritrea alone, all the Ethiopian opposition force, they're a safe haven. They were recruited, armed, organized, and launching their attack from Eritrea to Ethiopia. By the same token, in Ethiopia, all the opposition, 11 Eritrean opposition forces were harbored in Tigray alone. I'm talking about ethnic, ideological, or religious organization. The Afar, the Kunama, the ELF, Islamic Salvation Front, all this were harbored in there. So the hostility between those 2 nations, one Kullal and the other nation, has been going on for a while. Then the popularity of EPRDF was on decrease. This is when everybody was posturing for a better position to attack one another. And that, at the same time, the OPDO, which Abiy Ahmed came from, it used to be just a satellite organization dominated by the TPLF, but gradually it was moving towards independence. They were flexing their muscle to a degree. And it gives them some kind of importance within the organization. Although some may say EPRDF strictly controlled by TPLF, but there was some movement within that structure, within that political organization, that was showing their independence. So Abiy Ahmed and Lamma Magarsa and others were within that clique. And then TPLF, when the change comes, TPLF, they saw how massive the movement was, the popular movement was, so they decided to retreat. And some may call it retreat with honor. So if they stay and continue their repression towards the rest of the Ethiopian people, it would have been dangerous. In fact, it would have been dangerous for TPLF to exist as an organization. So what they did is, when the change comes, they retreat back to Tigray. So they stayed there, and it helps them, for them to survive. And eventually, when other ethnic groups conflict arises, meaning like the Amhara and the Oromos, their strategy to retreat to their land makes much more sense. And in fact, they're dealing with the rest of Ethiopia with a position of strength to a degree. I'll explain this all later on. So the outbreak of inter-ethnic violence. So the opposition movement used this opportunity, the weakening of the TPLF and EPRDF alliance, and they campaigned against it. Remember, I was saying the opposition was in diaspora, in Eritrea, within the structure of EPRDF, was showing their independence to a degree. So they were becoming stronger. One thing is, the Amhara and the Oromo group created an alliance by demonizing the Tigrayans, rightly so, because they were marginalized to a degree. So they formed that alliance. But when they forged this alliance, it was based on anti-TPLF. No vision beyond that. So when they created that alliance and took over Addis Ababa, jumping forward, the conflict to arise again did not take long. 6 months down the line, the Amharas and the Amharas and the Oromos began to conflict. So that conflict has a lot to do with the ethnic federal system versus a unitary system that we witness today. That can also account for this ethnic genocide, if you want to call it genocide. I stand corrected on that one. That was the reason for everything that we see in that region. But as a camouflage, they're using that one declares unity, that Ethiopia history as a justification. The other one, ethnic nationalism, the right to determine your own destiny. But in the back of it is just two issues that arises out of this. One is the ethnic federalism, which the Oromos and other ethnic groups were accustomed for so many years, and they benefited to a degree. They did not want to let go. On the other one, the historians, the Ethiopian history, they're so proud of Ethiopian history as one entity for the last so many years, wanted to preserve that identity, Ethiopian identity, and they call it Zega. And I'll come to it. I know I'm touching a lot of subjects here, but I'll come to it. But at the end of the day, those are the issues that the opportunities and challenges, if we need to talk about, for the future of Ethiopia and its relation with Eritrea. Those are the two major issues that I identified. Then we'll talk about it later on.
Thank you. I would just want to focus on the democratization process in Ethiopia. When I was back in Ethiopia, especially like the democracy was about like you have all these different regions in the country called kilils, but then in each kilil it's the federal region which is choosing the leaders. So unless you are appointed by the federal system and you from like you have the support of the ruling party, there's no way you're going to be in office. So the office was a problem. Maybe in 1 year there would be 3 different regional presidents because whoever is in power don't like them, or if they don't abide by their rules, then they would be immediately changed. That's one thing. So I don't know if that was really democratically way of choosing regional presidents, but that was what was happening. The second thing that was happening was when these so-called regional powers, even though it's good that you have a self-determination, to have your own flag, your own national identity, even though everyone calls themselves Ethiopians, but then it's also good to have your own, identity to be recognized for who you are, the right to exercise your religion, your own, like I said, everything that identifies you, who you are. But then the problem was a lot of people were not feeling like they're included in the central, or like the, what do you call the east, the southwest side of Ethiopia. Like some of those people who were siding from the east all the way to like the Somali Killil and all that were feeling like that they were marginalized for a very long time. They felt like, even though they have a lot of resources in their country, in the region, yet they couldn't use the resources because there were conflicts on resources. Last time there was conflict on the minerals and the deposits, the deposits for oil and all that, and then people were protesting and be like, the government's coming to take our resources and we can't allow that. And then the government was like, we're going to give you 5%. And people were like, how are you going to give us 5% for something we have for generations? And then there was a lot of conflicts. People were dissatisfied and uprising and demonstrating, and they were like, this is what we have been fighting for against all these years, on and off. Because since Abiy Ahmed came into power, something good he did was he released all political prisoners, and then he also gave a pardon to everyone who was against the government. So he said, hey, I know there has been a problem going on, but now let's come together and you have nothing to fear. There will be freedom of speech. We're going to go back to the road of democracy. But then once you do that, you are opening a lot of gates. You know that, right? You are bringing these people who've been fighting against the government. But then when all these different factions come to the country and you want them to seek their solutions in a peaceful way, these people are also going to, let's say, hey, we don't see our interests because all we see is the government still controlling the resources and the things we've been fighting for. So even though the Ogaden Liberation Front agreed to come back and they said, from now on we're going to be a political party instead of being an armed guerrilla fighters against the government. And there were a lot of other groups. But then again, once that happened, they saw themselves, they were not part of the regional power sharing, and they felt like they are left out again. And a lot of people are like, they are not happy like the fact that it's still the federal government appointed leaders from the top, and those leaders were never chosen by the people. Like the president, Mustafa, and all his other cabinets were appointed directly from Abiy Ahmed. So they have their legitimacy from the central government, not from the people. And that's one problem. I think this is the same problem happening. This happening under the EPRDF, when they had, still the EPRDF system is in place, but then we are saying there's a change, but then if there's a change, we still have the same problems happening. But one thing I really applaud for the government, and I support them, is the fact that there's more freedoms. Like there's more freedom of speech, freedom of press, even though that's one problem we are seeing happening lately, because some people felt like the government's going back to put more restrictions on the media. And they were like, this is the way to go to dictatorship. But others are saying, no, it's just, some of these politicians like Jawar Mohammed, who's just using and playing with the emotions of people. But then whatever the case is, I think there is a lot of, problems happening there. So when I say democratization process, we're going to have an upcoming election. And like Jawar Mohammed said, he's also going to be part of the candidates. And is he going to renounce his U.S. citizenship? Because I don't think anyone who has foreign passports are allowed to run for a government position. So I don't know if he's going to renounce that. I think he should do that. Other than that, there are like regional powers who are appointed by the central government who don't have legitimacy from the local people. So whenever there is an election, there is no one-to-one vote. All that happens is like they are elected by the parliament. The parliament are chosen from representation of different local districts. And even that itself, I don't think it's democratically done. So when we talk about democracy, I think there are a lot of ways democracy in Ethiopia is interchangeably used with ethnic federalism. Because when we're talking about ethnic federalism is all about I have my territory, I have my resource. So, and then, whoever is coming from different state shouldn't come and tell me what to do. So if someone from Oromo region comes to the, Amharic region, he's technically a foreigner because nobody's going to say this guy is from the state because he might have a different agenda from the people of that region. Or if you bring someone from the Amharic region to Somali region, people will not like that because people think like there is a power, like there is, how do I say, like these people are coming to just take over your region, like your resources and all that. The other thing is Abiy Ahmed won his the Peace Nobel Prize. That was really a good thing. I really agreed with that because a lot of people are saying like it wasn't the right time for him to win because in the past there were people who won Nobel Peace Prize, like the lady who Burma, like what's her name? And and then after she won that, and she's been like she was placed so many years in house arrest, and she was fighting for freedom and human rights. And then once she got into power, she's just like not the same person. Now she don't want even to recognize the rights of the Rohingya minorities. She don't even want to recognize the fact that there was an ethnic cleansing in her country. So a lot of times when people like win recognition for what they do, it could be like very mature thing. So I think it's a good, like Nagasa said, it's good that we recognize the change that's taking place in the Horn of Africa, and for that reason, I think Eritrea and Somalia opening up their borders, and then they had their first, I think, state visit. Isaias of work went to Somalia, and there was a lot of different, meetings. So I think that really opened a good door and for cooperation and unity in the East African countries. But then again, we don't have to also like look. We don't have to ignore the fact that there are problems of like still ethnic problems and tensions happening in the country. And if Abiy Ahmed won the Nobel Peace Prize for initiating peace and transparency, he should finish what he started. Thank you.
Okay, I think most of the ideas are mentioned. To begin with, I recently have been having confusion even when it comes to the concept of democracy. How do we define democracy? Is it only a majority rule? And now the liberal idea being challenged all over the world, including here, it's been confusing. For me, the way I start to think about is how can I lessen the suffering of human in East Africa or Ethiopia? I think I have 3 points. The first thing is in Ethiopia or East Africa, especially there are 2/3 of our population is less than 25 years, which is a crazy amount of young people in Ethiopia. There is no, as Nagasa mentioned earlier, there is no job opportunity, there is no hope, which makes it a dangerous situation for them to be manipulated by anyone whenever you don't have hope. So that by itself is the first thing to be tackled if we want to have a peaceful, democratic East Africa. The first thing is job opportunity. At the same time, I also understand to create job, we need security. So it's like a vicious circle. So that's one thing we need to consider. And what things that are happening now are also leading to a bigger catastrophe in the future. Recently, I read a news, 3 million kids were not able to go to school this year in Ethiopia, which is a staggering number. So 10 years or 20 years down the road, I can't imagine what the future of this is going to be. So while we're also talking about all these scenarios, in the background, for example, the grade 12 national examination, it was out of 700. Because of something that we don't understand, the government decided to take it out of 400 because they claimed exams were out. Still, it was somehow connected to some political issue in the background. That by itself is again killing another generation of students. So that's one thing we should consider when it comes to democratization. What's happening now and how will this perpetuate? The other thing is EPRDF. So, for example, how is the EPRDF organized? That's one question we should ask. Still, it's ethnic-based, and if they don't want Prime Minister Abiy to be Prime Minister anymore, it's a matter of ODP getting together tonight and decide we don't want him to be our leader. Then it's a matter of EPRDF deciding. 180 people decide the fate of 100 million people, which is crazy as well. Because there are only 4 parties in EPRDF, and then EPRDF is the front. So we should also understand how can that, I think that's what EPRDF is going through as well now. That's what the Prime Minister is trying to tackle as well. The way EPRDF is organized is a threat by itself now for the state, and how they are fighting, how they are using the young generation. So those are the things we should consider when it comes to EPRDF. And EPRDF also has almost close to 9 million cadres. 6 million cadres from what I don't even know if they keep track, but there are millions of cadres out there who get benefits solely based on being part of the party. So that is also a hindrance for democratization. So these are very complicated ideas, and we also need systematic solution. I also believe there is a quote, I'm not sure if I'm quoting it right, but I think by Albert Einstein, you cannot solve a problem by the same consciousness which created it. So EPRDF is the one who created this issue in the 1991. Actually, what I was expecting when Abiy came to power, or EPRDF 2.0 come to power, is if we are going to have another genuine conversation, how can we move forward? The question of Ethiopia by itself is now, who's Ethiopian? Has been there, the same question has been asked for the past 40 years. So I thought it was a chance to have genuine conversation. We still didn't have this genuine conversation. So the problems are complex, but the solution being offered so far are not at the same magnitude of the depth of the problem we have. So one huge problem is EPRDF. I think they also figured out that's the issue, and the Prime Minister is really struggling to come up with a new ideology, which is Madammer. I still didn't understand the concept because I didn't read the book fully. So shifting from democratic centralization or revolutionary democracy to Madammer by itself, what does it look like? How is it going to affect the 6 million cadres in EPRDF? There are so many power struggle going on in EPRDF as well. That's actually the main trait for me, for East Africa, rather than the young population who's desperate, and I try to sympathize with them that they don't have any hope. So that's one thing we should continue to ask, and what that scares me actually. For example, the recent exchange between TPLF and ADP, the Amharic Democratic Party, and TPLF, it's really scary. It doesn't even look like we're in the same country. They are both somehow was calling for the military to get involved in their mess. So those are the genuine questions you should ask. What's going on in EPRDF? And I don't think we also have responsible leaders. It's now, unfortunately, the politics is being maneuvered by so-called activists, Facebook posts. So whenever there is something, a senior leader, you see them posting on Facebook some nonsense. So those are the things we also expect from our leaders, to have great quality and have this integrity, but unfortunately they are also the product of this system, which is EPRDF. So it's a vicious circle, and I think that's one big issue I expect and I see as a hindrance for any democratization, or at least lessening the suffering of our people. The other one is weak opposition. We have 107 opposition parties as of now. I really even don't understand. But if you ask political manifesto, I couldn't find a single political manifesto for the majority of them. They don't, I haven't seen any debate. Now we are almost left with 5 or 6 months. And the unfortunate thing that happened to us the past 27 years was belittling of ideas. it's just my only manifesto is my ethnic identity. I don't need to promise saying this is my education policy, this is the policy I have for health, this is the financial policy I should follow, these things like that. We haven't still seen that. They are even planning to strike. I think 70 parties are planning to have a hunger strike for some. It's really sad how the politics falls into some ethnic entrepreneurs and also be it nationalist or it's not nationalist. It's really sad. So I don't even have hope when I see the other side, who's the so-called the opposition, who's supposed to oppose by bringing ideas. They are also using the same token that EPRDF is using. So these are really the big questions that we are facing. And as my friend mentioned earlier, it's also the basic question of nationalism, the ethno-nationalist versus citizen or Zega, as they called it. And I really understand where they are coming from. We should have genuine discussion, but at the end of the day, the goal is to lessen the suffering. Nobody even discussed about the 3 million kids who are not going to school this year. I haven't seen any discussion about that. Everything is, so those are the kind of things, the quality of leaders, the EPRDF organization, the amount of young people we have in the country. These are really, really concerning factors to have a better system in our country. And it should also start from the leadership. And I think later maybe we will come to solution. But for me, the first thing is how EPRDF is organized, how it has all these millions of cadres who have been benefiting out of this, and how we have a weak opposition. These are the main factors for me that I see as of now. And I hope those are the things will be fixed through time. Thank you.
I want to. So I want to just add a little bit that complicates but also might show some hope. And I'm sure that it feels like, you say vicious cycle, that it feels like you're trapped. And it seems to me as an outsider that it is both about Ethiopia but also about the world. And if we look at the world today, we have 2 months of protest and challenge in Lebanon. We have these enormous protests in Chile. The protests in Hong Kong, which the world seems very confused about. Are they about democracy in Hong Kong? Are they about elitism and protecting privilege in Hong Kong compared to the mainland of China? I think it's important, maybe helpful, to think about how this global economic system, which has drained resources from Ethiopia, has as you have described. So the government is the largest employer because the corporate world is not there. I wonder, is China discovering Ethiopia, and would that be a good thing or a bad thing? But to understand how unstable the world is right now, in the aftermath of the end of the Cold War politically, in the aftermath of really the crisis of global neoliberalism since at least the crisis of 2007, 8, 9. And that might mean that the situation in Ethiopia is even more difficult, but it may also be helpful in seeing that while you experience it through an ethnic lens and framework, that other countries that may not use an ethnic lens or framework face the same challenges. And so the solution might lie in some broader way of looking at it. The other thing that strikes me is your role, the role of people in the diaspora. So the material resources that you have and the access to ideas and other relationships. And so I know Petros was just in Germany. Others of you have been in other places. There are diasporic, Oromo, Amharic, Eritrean communities in other parts of the world. What resources, how are they weighing in? And I think it's terribly unfortunate that this Jawar Mohammed has returned to Ethiopia and in some ways lit the spark that has created so much disorder and ethnic conflict. That's not the kind of role that I would hope that people in the diaspora can play. But it seems that diaspora is a resource, and how can that resource be productive in creating peace and stability? Maybe the last thing, I know Negesa has spoken before, and others have in these other conversations about the need for some sort of truth and reconciliation process and some way to have conversations that recognize what has happened and try to move forward as human beings together. So I just wanted to jump in and add, we are obviously not going to solve all of this today. And I also want to just take the opportunity to mention that Cal and Hannah have a poetry and arts group that will be here on Saturday, December 7th. And one of the things we hope for here at the Eastside Freedom Library is that people are finding in the arts a way to build relationships and gain new ideas and move forward. So I hope that people who are watching and listening will also join us on December 7th. So now that I've said all that, Joseph, do you want to say anything? No? Okay.
Yeah, I have nothing to say.
Oh.
Let's give chance to. Because Petros should. Yeah,
If the Horn of Africa professor is not saying anything, I'm not saying either.
That's some really good points.
Okay, no problem. No, I think Peter mentioned a couple of stuff, and one of the things is the cooperation world and the outside world that goes beyond somebody else's skillet or territory. A country as small as Djibouti, who does not have a million people population, have 7 forces. In fact, some of the forces are 6 miles apart. The Chinese, the US, the Japan, German, Saudi Arabia, and you can count. The country is so small. So there's vested interest for all those. China, not only there, they're in Somalia, they're in Djibouti. For the first time, they have a military base in Djibouti, China. They do have that. And if you go beyond that, we can talk about Egypt, the Nile issue. Egypt is recruiting South Sudan and Uganda to be against, to attack Ethiopia. So we're surrounded. On top of this ethnic issue and local issue that we're talking about, we have a bigger issue that we're neglecting to observe, to see. And this is dangerous. This is a question of survival. Eritrea. The Yemen is, the story of the Yemen. Almost 10 million people are starving today. Guess where they're launching their attack from? Assab, port of Assab. He gave them a contract for over 20, 30 years. So I agree with you, but the second point that you raised is reconciliation. How does peace and reconciliation? This is a start. This is my first time, by the way, with the Horn of Africa community from a different place to come and talk about our issues. We're not saying, we're not hanging to our position and say, I'm right, you're wrong. But I said, let's explore together. There's certain things that we need to identify. My Oromo brothers, my Somali brothers, my Ethiopian brothers, regardless of what wants to be called, I have to respect that first. Then go from there. You know, whether just like you said, instead of talking about this political polemics, let's talk about justice. 3 million students are not going to school. That is a heavy price to pay as a nation. So those things would be, a rallying ground for all of us, the Horn of African community, to start working on. I'll make it short.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me give the chance to Najah.
I don't have much to say again. I really appreciate actually the points that you brought up in terms of the geopolitical aspect of the situation in Ethiopia, especially with the lens on neoliberalism. I think my background specifically is from the lens of an outsider. Like I said, I didn't grow up there. I grew up here. And so when I see the situation, I don't see it from an ethnic perspective, especially having gone back after 20 years. I went as a humanitarian. As a medical student, I conducted a humanitarian medical mission trip. And so when I was there, I wasn't looking to just serve the Oromo people. I was in the capital, but everyone is there. And so I saw the situation from a humanitarian perspective and the impact of, of health disparities with the people living in the capital, and how, we have been boasting about this man who came into power, who seemed like a visionary, but yet the situation on the ground was, dire. People are not living in the best conditions for health. And I think, so that's how I saw it. But I think also having traveled the world for the most part in very unstable regions, I was in Israel, Palestine during the time of the Arab uprising. And so I saw that firsthand. And then I was also in Haiti a couple of years ago, and now, actually it was during the first uprising after the Brazil World Cup loss, and that's when it started. But, these geopolitical issues are not isolated, and I do think that Ethiopia should give that some thought with, the Sudan uprising and everything going on in Egypt, Yemen, Syria. There is some geopolitical instability, and, people have economic interests in Ethiopia. China does, the US does. And so being able to sort of see the situation from a geopolitical perspective, I think gives Ethiopia the opportunity to combat it so that you're not so focused on, inter-ethnic issues. I think a lot of the problems with the political process has been, there's instability, and then we hurriedly just put someone in office so that everyone can be happy for the time being. And that's not exactly the best situation for political stability. Everyone, I think, to this point has been sort of, pushed into office because of the situation. I think there should be a thought-out political process where it's, democratic. Like you said, Mahdi, I think we need to avoid this top-down, mitigation of issues. We need to be able to have all the regions, voice their concerns, have political forums, discussions. Political parties need to have a manifesto, like you said, being able to say, here's what we provide, what we can provide for the whole nation as opposed to just one ethnic group. And that hasn't been the case. I think, like you said, the diaspora has been trying to be like, yes, I'm Oromo, or yes, I'm Amhara, and this is what we need to do for our people. But we're not in a vacuum. Like, we don't live in a vacuum in Ethiopia. It should be, how do we, become a power that's stable in the world stage? We can't do that if we're just all trying to just vie for ourselves, for our ethnic group. And I think that's where my perspective is.
Okay. So I think we're how much time do we have?
Another 15, 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah. So I would say a few things as, I better say my recommendations, and I will mention some of the points that have been mentioned by my friends. One point was weak opposition. That's true. Our opposition groups are very weak. And the people, if they want to have a true democracy, we need a stronger opposition. That's one of the institutions, because these parties that is going to be a government if they win an election. And I will answer also another issue Mahadi said. Yes, TPLF have been assigning leaders to all the regions from behind. That has been there underway. And the last 1 year, if that trend continues, assigning from federal government, it can happen, but we can only stop that through election process, through free and fair elections. Then regions would, as Ethiopia being a parliamentary democracy, a parliamentary system, regions, both regions and the federal government will have legislatives that has to be there. They has to be elected through free, fair, and transparent elections. That is where we have to focus. That is the main. I can say the fundamental thing in democracy. At least making sure electoral democracy is very important. That is how you can. The self-rule is through that, and the focus should be that. And it is then the Somali regional state parliament would elect the president. Now all regions have vice president. They don't have president because these vice presidents are not member of the regional parliament. The thing is, the previous president has been abusing everything, has been violating everything. The country to stay, you have to assign someone who can really undo those bad things. And so there is a vice president in Somali region. There is a vice president in Oromo region. I think he is also not a member of the Oromo regional parliament. It's all being done about stability to stabilize the country. Our focus should be on that election process, and that is only when, if we do that right, then at least if we make sure that electoral democracy works well, the transition will be good. That is a very important point, but people are not focusing on that. That needs focus. That can only be right, that can only be successful if there are conversations, if there are genuine dialogue and conversation among the stakeholders, elites, and these political groups and all civic organizations. I don't think enough has been done on that side. So other points I see is I still want to stress on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission thing. A lot of international organizations are willing to help on that. So I think the government should make a call on for that, for those things. And also, at the same time, the disarming, dissolution, and reintegration of the guerrilla fighters. Some guerrillas like ONLF are back there. They came back to the normal civil life, but still we should know their situation. They can go back. And in Oromo region, there is a faction of OLF who are still fighting. There has to be a commission to bring them to, government should negotiate and bring them to the peaceful life. They should not just try to crush them and destroy them. Maybe they cannot destroy them. So that DDR process should take place. And I think international community, a lot of organizations are willing to assist Ethiopia at this moment. Then the government should make a call. And a lot of diaspora community, including myself, I'm willing to go and help by whatever I can with any organization. And a lot of Ethiopians, I am sure, we were very excited, we were willing to do whatever, but we're not well organized. We were organized to push EPRDF in those times. We've been going to legislatives, pushing for resolutions, we were protesting, we have been doing the media advocacy, we have been doing legislative advocacy, a lot of things. in our own way. Actually, we even don't have the same agenda to run after the change. The only agenda that we agreed all is to sack TPLF. But then after that, we could not continue in that unity, because that unity was only to push EPRDF and not TPLF. But now we don't have that, but still we need to come together. I mean, there should be dialogues here and there, I mean, everywhere. I know some people have been trying here in Minnesota. I think last weekend, a week from today, there was conversation. That should be encouraged, that should continue. And this should continue also. And on the part of governments, there should be call to these institutions. We had a conversation here with the advocates for human rights. They are willing to work on the Peace and the Reconciliation Commission. Hope if there is a call and willing on the side of the government, they can have projects, they can have the funding for them. So it is, while we were discussing this thing that last time those inter-ethnic conflict happened, and still we see that sign, you know, something should be done before broader or more genocide happens. So we should focus on peace, reconciliation, and stability issues more than anything. I do agree our politics should be about how literacy should happen, how people should have on education, on employment, on health issues and other agendas. The parties should have that agendas, even instead of only focusing about ethnic issue, focusing on those issues, because the country, we have a people which doesn't have even doesn't have anything to eat. I mean, always you see hunger here and there and starvation, and the major agenda should have been that. That should be the agenda you should run for election or for any political thing. And sometimes you should leave that other differences and focus on that to change those issues. But we are not focusing on that. That is one of the problems. So the political groups should, those agendas unite all Ethiopians, because we all are poor. We all have health problems, humanitarian problems. We all have a problem of education. There are several issues that unites, that we should work together. Even if we overcome those problems, even those problems that divides us can be resolved, by the way. So it is very important that there has to be some ideological shift, some kind of attitudinal shift towards this. I hope this generation would change those things. And I think I talked a lot. Let me give a chance to my brothers.
I just want to say one thing quick. I totally agree with Nacha on what she said on focusing.
I was concerned, I'm cautiously optimistic how now we have a homegrown economic plan that nobody's paying attention to. The World Bank and I think Harvard Innovation Lab or someone is involved for a 3-year project to help the Ethiopian homegrown economy. And nobody knows what homegrown is, how it's defined, and the privatization policy and all the economic change that are going on in Ethiopia. Now, unfortunately, again, the EPRDF organizing the overall the front, and the politics we have been into, the ethnic politics, and be it nationalist or nationalist, it gave us a myopic vision of the world, what's going on. Even we don't even know as we speak right now what's going on in the backyard of East Africa, what's going on, what's the global force there. So hopefully the young generation in the diaspora will shed a light on that, start to question what's the economic plan. EPRDF as a party decided, I think last year, EPRDF 2.0, and the reason I call it 2.0 is after the change, decided we should proceed with privatization. Like, how dare a party decide that for a country? First, we question the legitimacy, because they won. The EPRDF, which is in power now, is the one who won by 100%. 5 years ago. So those are the things we don't even have time to discuss about. They decided the property of Ethiopia, which has been accumulated for a while, it's going to be transferred somehow with a bizarre policy that we are not even sure about. It's going to happen soon. And unfortunately, we are busy and occupied with this day-to-day Facebook and whatnot activism. So I hope the diaspora will shift the conversation. We cannot even resist the global economic force as East Africa, let alone as an Oromo or Amhara or disintegrated Ethiopia. The global economic force is so powerful, and we are seeing so even the next kind of oppression that will be in Ethiopia cannot be resisted easily, and it will be a hard cycle that we cannot get out of unless we start to awaken our people, we start to awaken the young generation, and also hopefully the social media activism can also gear towards awakening most of the diaspora and everyone. I mean, only 4% I think actually use Facebook in Ethiopia. 4% are online. 96% of our people are not online. This is also one thing we should be aware of when people insult each other, saying all Oromos are this, homogenizing as usual, all Amaras are this. We should be considerate of 85% of our people are farmers. So we should also have this politics of empathy, trying to understand where's my brother coming from, and how many of them are online, who's representing, who's saying what. So I hope we need to have more of that conversation so that everybody will pause and realize, wow, actually we have a bigger problem, which is the global economic agenda. So I really like what Peter was saying earlier, and my sister there, who we should be concerned about that. So actually I'm really worried on the macroeconomic plan that's going on as of now. And the sad thing is still EPRDF doesn't see that. Even up to the senior leadership, sorry to say that, the way they see the world is really scary. When I see they talk about the economic policy and whatnot, we should start to challenge that. It's not a matter of supporting one person or not. It's about fact. I shouldn't always support the Prime Minister or Jawar or someone. I should stand by myself and start to say, wow, that's not a good idea. I should read more fact-based conversation should happen. But what's leading us to crisis now, and what's even leading us not to listen to each other, is because I just support one person no matter what. We should start to question this, and I hope this kind of dialogue will awaken the young generation. Have to start this genuine conversation, think about 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, how can we resist the global economic crisis coming to us and whatnot. And also the main goal is, as we said earlier, is by the end of the day, it's lessening human suffering. So how can we work towards that? So when it comes to Ethiopia, it should start from education policy, actually. The education policy. Unfortunately, what's going on in our universities nowadays, it's not idea debate or anything. It's just fighting with all different ethnic issues and whatnot, which is really sad. And it starts from the whole education policy, how the country's politics is organized. So there is a lot of work to be done, but at least with individual level, we can start by being critical, having this conversation whenever we have, trying to find the common ground. As was said earlier, we are all poor, so that's the major ground we can start to work on. So I hope these conversations will continue and make us realize how we have a lot of many things that makes us common than things that actually make us different. So thank you.
So let me just close this conversation today to say there will be more. Yes, please.
Thank you. Just listening to you guys talking nice. It's a good conversation to change ideas like this. I don't have anything to say, but I just wanna say something. Well, from Ethiopia, as Oromo said, I've been out more than 21 years. I grew up in Kenya, but I focus on listening, researching on Ethiopia histories or Oromo histories, because I came from stronger families. My family, a lot of my family is fighting for freedoms. So I just forget my name. And my name is Ahmed Jilo. So I don't have anything to say. I just want to say views. But if we see the way that like Dr. Abiy came to the power, he came with a lot of hopes. We never see like Ethiopian leaders came like Dr. Abiy came with that hopes. We see like we know his history, but history, Haile Selassie's, Dergis, but TPLF 27 years, which is the old government before him, which ruled like 27 years. But Abiy hope is very, for me, it's very nice. He came with like a unit and a law village. He called a lot of opposition party from outside to the countries, release a lot of prison jails, because that means like he tried to focus to make Ethiopia united, making, you know, every political party when they came in history in Ethiopia, they divide the ethnic group. That means they not focus on the unit of the government, unit of the country. They just focuses on their benefit of the dividing the people and take a long time to rule the countries. That's what they focus on. But his vision is big different with all these leaders. So we see a lot of it. So far, it changed even in 1 year, because we see a lot of free speech democratic in Ethiopia. I went like when he get the position, where I went there after he been almost 6 years, 6 months. When I came, there's a lot of changes came, but before there's no one, 2, 3 people was on the street talking to each other. But that time when after he came, there's a lot of changes came even in few months. So even he did with a lot of with the neighbors between Eritreans and Ethiopian, between Eritreans and the Djiboutis, Kenyans and the Somalis. Even he involved a lot in Sudanese. So, but when we see it right now, but the big problem is within Ethiopia. So all the government left a lot of problem in the countries, divide this, and so it's gonna take time to resolve within Ethiopia. There's what all the governments left is the huge problem in the countries. So the way I think is the people is thinking in 2 years or 1 year everything gonna be okay. But I don't think there's a huge of the problem gonna take a time. At the same time, there's a lot of group attacking him too. But there's a lot of group, a lot of organization below or try to this change is gonna, this transition is not gonna come in the ground. There's a lot of group is working on that one to block this one too. There's one thing I want to say that we have as Ethiopians, we need a unity, especially in diaspora. We have to focus on which leader is good for the all Ethiopians. We don't need the leaders only focus on one ethnic group. In Ethiopia, we have more than 83 ethnic group. Yeah, and I guess I know that anybody. So we need the leaders who can hold in with hand right with all those ethnic groups. We don't need like only one leader taking another ethnic to the power and making the another one on the left. But so we, as all East African as well as one of the Africans, where we need to, as a diaspora, making united and changing the ideas. And as Ethiopian, but I think they have to have the patience. There is going to be a lot of problems in Ethiopia past a lot of the government is on. I don't think we're gonna get everything, every democratic or everything in 1 year or 2, 3 years. It's gonna take a time. So that's what I want to say. But it's nice to join to you guys with good conversation. Thank you.
One thing to say.
Yes, Joseph.
Just as a way of conclusion, I hope whoever is watching this, and even for us as we're talking about it, for some reason, because we experience the politics of things, we oftentimes fail to appreciate the complexity of what politics is. I think the various issues that you've all brought up just illustrate how many layers of complexity there is. And I think as a comparison, if we were to talk about some illness, I mean, medical student, right? If we talk about, for instance, curing cancer, any person who's doing research on that will tell you just how complex this thing is we call cancer. Is that even one thing? And so on and so forth. I mean, the history of cancer research is many years, goes many years back, and yet still we're learning more and more. And so that is to say, just think when we talk about Ethiopia, or the Horn in general, or the US, whatever it may be, just sort of stepping back and getting an appreciation, just like, man, this is a complex thing that we're dealing with. And if I pull one string, it can then pull all kinds of other strings that I may not like. And so, sort of just getting that appreciation, I think, is an important first step, while at the same time not becoming complacent and asking these kinds of questions, as in, what does it mean if, because we speak the same language, how does that make me now be able to pay for my bills? Right? I don't know. Please tell me. And so pushing these kinds of questions on a really sort of hard level, I think, is important. But nonetheless, just as a big point to be made, that I think we fail to appreciate the complexities of politics. It's a very difficult thing. There's a reason why we see the kinds of things we see. If they were easy, we probably wouldn't see them. Right? So realize that. It's a very difficult thing. That's it.
I want to pick up on Joseph's point about the complexities of politics, and I don't want anyone to think, therefore, there are some very smart people who are not in this room who are somehow going to solve these problems. And as someone who's lived my entire life in the United States, I would certainly say that the President of the United States today is good evidence that the smartest people are not in charge. And so we have to not run away from things that seem to be complex, and that together we have different pieces of the answers, and if we keep talking to each other, we can find and make answers. So I want to, I don't know whether everyone here realizes that, we're a small number of people in this room, and there are thousands of people watching this conversation, which I find amazing and inspiring and intimidating. And I hope that they will send their ideas and messages, and if they can be in the same space with us, join us in conversation. I so appreciate Nagesa's determination that we should continue to do this. And I appreciate everyone who's come today and everyone who's watching. And we will, I'm sure, have another occasion for a conversation. And I think, when we think about the issues, what you all have identified as the issues of education, of humanitarian aid, of job creation, of what is a homegrown economy, that these could all be issues that we could come back together and talk about, not talk about what the Oromos think compared to the Amharas, compared to the Eritreans, but to pick the issues that cut across all of us and have conversations about those issues. So that might be a direction that we could go in with these conversations. So thank you all for coming and watching. Thank you, Carla, for live streaming this, and we will see you all again. Thank you.